Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
and today's episode 143 of Podcast 2 for 1. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. That way you're up to date on all future episode of Podcast 2 for 1, as well as all the cool content we have at YouTube, or at 2 for 1 Studios, youtube.com/2 for 1 Studios, the best place to consume the content. Man, I was like, man, you're doing really good. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, oh no, it was just happening naturally, and then I fucked it all up.
Yeah, I liked it. I think it felt more like old days.
Oh, good. Nostalgia.
Retro, yeah, exactly.
Nostalgia. And if you didn't know, and you probably didn't, let's just be honest, we are sponsored by Capella Comics, located at 4047 East Hill Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas. Though they have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and of course, special guest appearances throughout the year. Yeah, Daniel, we're talking the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special by James Gunn. Marvel come out, I think earlier at the D23 press conference this year, or maybe it was Comic-Con, don't remember which one, SDCC, and they said that the end of Phase 4 will be Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. And I said, are you forgetting about a little thing called the Holiday Special featuring our favorite Guardians of the Galaxy? And yeah, I mean, they say Ant-Man is the beginning of Phase 5, and I think this is, maybe it's the epilogue of Phase 4, I don't know. But one thing I think that we've universally been saying for a while now is that no matter how good or bad some of these things throughout Phase 4 are, we're, with this and at the end of Phase 4 with this holiday special, and also looking to Guardians Volume 3 and Phase 5, we could probably guarantee that these two things will at least be good because the track record that James Gunn has now, co-CEO of DC Universe, weirdly enough. And which we may talk about that too, actually, a little bit.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I've watched it twice now. I watched it once, and I've kind of somewhat in the background watched it twice. I think overall, my general thoughts, I really enjoy it. It's not the best Guardians content we've gotten. It may be the worst, but I really enjoy it. I think it's fun. It's got some humorous moments in it. It doesn't really add anything to the Marvel Cinematic Universe other than just some brief feel good moments. It's what it says it is. It's a holiday special, right? It's kind of based off this Star Wars holiday special idea, right? And the weirdness and the short form of that, and I mean, I like the premise of it, and I mean, I can see myself revisiting this one every couple of years. It's easily to digest, but I'm not sure it's something that I was hoping I would cry during it. Now, to be fair, I've been sick both times while watching it, so maybe my tears were elsewhere.
Yeah.
But I just, I was hoping that I could get gut punched. I'm must be a masochist. I'm like, please make me cry. But I didn't get that just this time. But I do find a lot to love about it. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, I liked it. I think it's not a big blip on my radar. It's not going to be something I probably think about too often, probably even after this pod. I think, like you said, it's not really, I mean, it's just a fun special. And I think that's fine. I think when I have some of my favorite characters on screen, I do wish that maybe they did a little bit more, maybe something even more heartfelt or more poignant or more real even. I liked it. There's a lot of songs, and it felt musical-ish. It felt like, with Mantis and Drax being in LA, it felt very kind of hijinksy or silly, I guess, at times. Yep. With the point of being light and festive, I guess. But I would have done it differently, and I think not always, but definitely this one. There's a few of the Marvel movies that I'm like, okay, no. At least for
there's a couple.
Yeah. Very few. Okay. But yeah, it's a thing of I can look at this on its own and be like, yeah, it's fine. There's nothing spectacular about it, but there's nothing wrong about it either. It is still feeling like it's in this trend that we've been in with MCU with Disney, where the MCU has just become Disney's go-to wrapper to put anything on because they know they'll get views for it, kind of thing.
Sure.
And and this is one that feels like no one said, "Oh my God, I have the best idea for a Guardians Christmas special. We have to do it. Let's do it." Right? That's not how this came about. This feels like it came about of like, hey, we've only got, it's been 3 years since we've had Guardians on screen with James Gunn. Let's throw in a Christmas special. It'll pull in this many views. You know what I mean? That's the decision this came out of. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about the Bob Iger, Bob Chapek things, and maybe that's been influenced, or maybe this will change. But I can look at it on its own as a single piece of media and be like, yeah, it's fine. I can look at it as part of the trend and be like, well, it's still kind of continuing the trend that I'm not a big fan of. But
no, I love that. Well, I have a little insight on the origin of this. That James Gunn has talked about it. One thing I do want to say that I really appreciate that James Gunn does, if you follow his Twitter, that he really is pretty vocal in terms of he kind of squashes things down, and like he also will give people tidbits or insights when they ask questions. He's really good about engaging with that kind of stuff. And one thing I'm looking forward to, and he's done a, considering they've only been in the room for a couple of weeks for the DCU, he's done a good job already communicating things and like how they're going to run things and just kind of what to expect in like the most granular level already.
Yeah.
But it's still like, it's nice that he's just kind of cutting some of the fat off just here and there as we go. That applies to Guardians also on this in the holiday special and Volume 3. I mean, so yeah, I agree with you. This is not something that's like, oh, this is the story. This, we only have one holiday special to tell, and this is the only story we can think of. To be fair, I think the idea of like going to get Kevin Bacon as a present for Star-Lord is a pretty fantastic idea.
Yeah,
like
it's clever. It's fun.
Well, in terms of like just what we've been set with the universe, everything else, I do think that. That's the downside of this is I feel like they kind of accomplished what they wanted to, but I also kind of like with you, I wish that they wanted to accomplish more.
Yes.
Yes. That's kind of the thing. Like it's like we talk about some of the films we see locally or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, they accomplished what they wanted, but like it's not what I would have wanted to accomplish,
Yeah, right. That doesn't make me get out of bed in the morning. What they're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, I'm glad that you feel like you did that, but you didn't really do anything for me or the water universe. But another thing too is like I like Mantis, and I love Drax. I do think that sometimes I'd say more so than not this we're getting the Guardians Volume 2 humor versus Volume 1, or like the James Gunn that it's not like grotesque or anything, but it's just kind of like a lot of it, some of it don't land, some of it does. And I think it only really lands because of the delivery with like Dave Bautista and stuff, and Clem, or I can't think of her name, and less so his dialogue, and they really, and I can see Bautista's like frustrations in terms of like they really have made his character just the butt of the joke. 100%.
Yeah, he's comic relief. That's all he is.
Yeah, it really is, and like I don't blame him anymore for like wanting to just be done with it. Like in the first, like if you go back and watch Volume 1, Volume 2, they're wildly different characters for the most part,
especially 1.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Like
he's unintentionally funny in 1, and it's like, it's like he has this dark, somber side to him that never gets brought up again. It feels like it's like, oh yeah, I think murdered my family, and this is my only purpose in life, and then it feels like that just.
I think the best moment, and it's one of my favorite moments in the MCU period, is when Mantis was when they're having their first conversation. Yeah. He's like, "You're so ugly," and she touches him, and like. What a beautiful way to express his pain when he can't through her, who else all she does is like basically mimic everyone else's pain, or it takes it upon herself. And so I thought, what a beautiful moment. I sobbed in the theater for the first time. And I kind of miss like that seriousness. And granted, this is a holiday special, right? We're not really, maybe not supposed to be sad or not, maybe, but I kind of wish we had, I don't know, took a little bit of, I think the highs, like happiness and joy, those work when you're contrasting them with some of the other emotions. And there is some sadness in there, of course. And there is some like downer moments, but it's not
Not really though. They don't feel real.
But I know, but that's what I'm saying. They're not like that moment Guardians Volume 2. And again, this is like what I think it's what he wanted to make.
Yeah.
Well, real quick on the origin of this, like from what I understand, they were talking about this idea come about in Volume 2 when they were shooting Volume 2. And James goes like, "Hey, wouldn't it be funny or cool if we did like a
Sure.
holiday special like Star Wars?" And they were like, "Yeah, it'd be great." And apparently James Gunn went and wrote it in like 2 days, the whole thing.
Sure.
And he's been sitting on that script since.
Yeah.
And then they were Disney Plus happened and they're like, "Oh," and apparently it was the first thing that was like greenlit from Disney Plus. Period was the holiday special, but they waited obviously till James Gunn finished his other contractual obligations for at the time the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker before they could start shooting Volume 3 of Guardians, and then they snuck this in there during the production. So that's kind of some background there for you, but or for the viewers.
Okay.
But another thing too is it just really didn't feel like the palette of the Guardians to me either. I feel like it kind of felt like stagey, like maybe volume-y,
Yes.
and like it felt like
in terms of like just the like cinematography.
well, that definitely. It felt like a TV movie, which maybe it's what the point was. I don't know. Maybe make it feel like a TV holiday special. I don't know. Again, I don't know why I don't know if those people would want it to look like that if they could have changed it back then. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
so I don't know if, I get like Werewolf by Night trying to emulate Universal horror movies, but even them, they look cinematic back in the 40s and 50s, at least, but I think it's even just the color.
You know what it looked like? You know what it looked like? It reminded me of Star Wars. It reminded me of the Disney Plus Star Wars shows. Like the whole, how it was all taking place in that little like small set area. That's what it felt like. Yeah,
it does, like the volume. And the big thing too is,
so when you say the volume, what does that mean? Sorry.
Oh, the volume is the 3D. It's like the Batman was shot on it, Mandalorian shot on it.
Okay, yeah, the thing they do with Unreal Engine.
Yeah. It's like the not green screen. It's like an LCD or LED, screen that like changes it changes in parallax with the camera you're using, which is really innovative. It's pretty cool. The Batman is like probably the best example of a live action movie I've seen that's used it and like use it effectively. Like the whole driving sequence, all that's in the volume, which is pretty incredible.
Right. Okay. Wow.
But yeah, and all the sky when they're on the skyline, he's talking to Catwoman. All that's the volume. Looks pretty great.
Interesting. Yeah.
But I think it to me it looks like it's kind of desaturated, and the only way we're getting colors is through the Christmas lights. I'm like, this is Guardians. Like I'm used to like Volume 2, where we're like, you're seeing like kind of like those recent NASA photos, like those high res, where you're seeing like the galaxies and the mist and the colors, and it kind of felt like we didn't get that aspect of the Guardians in it, So I don't know.
Yeah.
It felt a little cheaper also than what we normally get.
It did, and like you said, it's a Christmas special. It's not supposed to be a big deal, I guess.
Right.
But I think it did. It just kind of felt like just surface level-y in all the ways. You know what I mean? It was like surface level. All the Guardians were there. They all said their lines, all had their moments of jokes and stuff. And even just like the themes of it's just like, I don't know. It's just very basic. Like, Christmas is about spending time with the ones you love. And it's just like, that's fine. But it's just, I guess I wish, again, that there just may have been a bit more of like when you explained how this came about, that makes total sense to me. Because this does, like I said at the beginning, this feels like a movie or a thing that was, it was made because of the numbers it would get or whatever. But it could also feel like a random idea that's kind of funny, but actually not that funny. You know what I mean? Like when you're hanging out with people on set or like whatever, you're like, oh, what about this? And you're like kind of being a jokey, and then someone runs with it, and you're like, wow, that's a fun little joke. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's a small idea. It feels like a small idea. And I think that's fine, but we're dealing with the characters that live in like the biggest part of the universe, or like these characters are usually who we explore the far reaches of everything in the MCU.
Here's an idea. Just thought of it. What if the Guardians have to fight a guy that is like where the Santa mythology come from, and he's like a guy who goes in and And like he's, you know what I'm saying? And they have to enlist Kevin Bacon or some maybe, you know, some Kevin Bacon's involved somehow again. Like Star-Lord gets captured. And then they go to get Kevin Bacon to free Star-Lord. And, you know, it's like, and then the same situation, you know, then at the very end, they celebrate Christmas together. That's a way better idea.
I agree.
And
what did you think
cooler
of the? It is better. It's much better. What did you think of the animated portions at the beginning and the end?
Absolutely loved it. I did love that. That's one thing I could say that I loved. I think I just loved how Yondu was drawn, like his smirks and his faces. I wondered if they had like had them on set and they had like Moke. You know what I'm saying?
It was an interesting art style, animation style. Yeah, it looked very interesting. I kind of was one. I was like, why? I mean, I guess I feel like I would have maybe liked it a little more just in live action if they just shot it. Just because I would have loved to see like real Yondu again on screen, and it would have been really cool to actually have like, I don't know, Peter reminiscing about that. I don't know. I guess I feel like I just was like, oh, I just want actual. I know that's really his voice and stuff, Michael Rooker, but I think I just miss Yondu as a character.
Sure.
And so it's just like I wish.
I think. I know. I mean, I thought a similar thing, but I think I might prefer the animated just because I love the idea that it ends on like. I do like the ship creating happy holidays at the end. Like I like that the silliness of that, or like the I don't know the kidness and the whimsicalness of that. I do like that, and I think that's my favorite part was like, oh, this is not the whole story, and like I love their relationship, and you know because it also I
like that too.
It pulls on those strings in Volume 2. You know, like I think Volume 2 is like one of the apexes of like emotion in the MCU.
Yeah,
one of them that like Endgame and a couple others. So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. Do you think there'll be another Guardian special based on the after credit scene?
I don't think there's going to be another Guardians anything after Volume 3. They're going to show up in other people's medium, but I don't think anything will be titled Guardians of the Galaxy after that. Maybe
I think there will be. I mean, I don't think it'll be this team, but I
maybe
don't think
eventually, maybe in 10 years, like in a few years, that they reboot it or something. But
yeah, I think probably like Phase 6 or something. I don't think that. I just don't think that that's a big IP now. Like, I mean, they make video games based on the IP that sold well, and you know they have their own theme park at the Disney, you know, their own like the mansion tower thing. I think like it's just too big of an IP where they won't at least have the name. They may run into the ground, but I don't know if they will. I don't think it'll be Star-Lord, Drax, and all them guys. I think Drax will probably die. I think Rocket Raccoon could die. I think it's possible.
I think most likely this coming movie.
I think almost all of them could die besides Groot. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
I don't think Mantis will. She seems like such an easy character to throw into any other team.
Yeah, I agree.
You know?
I agree. I don't think Mantis or Groot will die, but everyone else is fair game, particularly Drax.
I could almost see Nebula living.
I could see her living too. Yeah, I could see Gamora living as well.
Rocket is. I mean, the movie's about Rocket, so it feels like his death is like just. Obvious. I don't know. Like it feels like it feels.
It's him, and then I think it could be him, and then Drax sacrificed himself, you know, for Rocket or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm curious. I mean, I don't see Batista ever doing it again after Volume 3.
No, I don't see him doing superhero media again. This may have like burned him from the whole genre.
What's wild about him is that he actually does, I think, a pretty good job of picking his roles. Like he's in that
serious dude, man. He's really serious about his acting.
He is like in that Shyamalan movie. Like, I mean, I don't know how that will be, but like at least that's all those people that
in Glass Onion.
He is. He's in Glass Onion, which is getting great reviews. You know, he's in Blade Runner. He was basically Odd Job in James Bond movie, which is like, you know, he is being in things too that's like probably tickles his nerdiness. You know, like obviously James Bond. You know, in Blade Runner, but like it's also like he is a serious actor, and you know, I would love to see.
I think he's best in serious roles. Personally, I think he's better as a serious actor than a comic one. I think his comic timing's fine, but I think he plays much better as a straight guy, like as like a don't fuck with like all business kind of dude, and like he plays that really well. I think.
No, I agree. I think you're right. I think so. I just wrapped it up. We have one more topic to discuss, but I think. You know, it did what they wanted it to do, and it had fun. Anything else in there stuck out to you, like Rocket getting the Bucky's arms?
The dog with the helmet and that was talking, is It's like they didn't introduce him. Like we already knew who that was. Has he been introduced somewhere?
Has not. His name's Cosmo the Space Dog.
Is
He's
he like a canonical part of the Guardians or something like that way?
yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, he's definitely
okay.
like he's a character that James Gunn's been talking about forever.
So it just sounds
Funny.
like they just threw him in there and like acted like he's been here for a while, and that was just like a little jarring to me.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right, and I mean, I think it's how he'll be in volume. I think he'll be in volume 3,
Yeah,
100%.
he seems like a fine character. It just felt like, where did you guys find him? Like, why is he with you? I don't know. What's the story here?
Yeah. There was, I want to say, at the end of Nowhere. In the end of Guardians 1, in the collectors. Yeah, no,
Oh,
yes,
is he
is
there?
right. In the collector's collection, Cosmo the Space Dog is in there somewhere.
That makes sense.
Which makes sense because they're on Nowhere in the holiday special, which apparently James Gunn also said in between their mercenariness between Endgame and Volume 3 or this, they have, they got enough money to buy Nowhere to fix it up. So that's what they've been doing.
So they bought Nowhere. Gotcha.
They bought Nowhere.
The planet, or like it's not really. It's like in an asteroid or something.
It's a Celestial's skull.
It didn't look like it in that show, and that looked like there was like a sun outside or something. I don't know. It felt like maybe it wasn't, but maybe it was just how they lit it. It just felt like it was outside. Everything that happened in that show, I thought they were like outdoors on the planet or something.
No, you're 100% right. That's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, Nowhere in the first movie, it feels like it's
it looks totally different.
Lit.
It's like
it's like
a big alley and like dark corners everywhere and bars and like it's like it's like a seedy place. This didn't look seedy. This looked like Tatooine. This looked like Tatooine. That's also why it felt like Star Wars, because if you told me they filmed that on the same set they filmed Tatooine, you wouldn't have to tell me because I already guessed it. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Well, it's under new management, so maybe that's why it happened. One thing, Daniel, I asked you before the pod started. I was like, I've been thinking about this for a while. Like, what's we finished what I consider all of Phase 4 now with the holiday special and Black Panther. So I was like, what's our top 5 favorite moments about the Phase 4? We've been pretty hard on it, rightfully so, I think. Or I was really hard on Black Panther, and we've been, you've been hard on Eternals, rightfully so, and we've both had other opinions throughout.
I think I dislike Thor's the worst one of this phase.
Wow, just because the expectations are so high.
Just because it's like they wasted I felt like they wasted my time. Like I got out of the movie, I was like, I should have watched that at home. Like that was not worthy of going to a theater. Like at least in the flawed movies that is Eternals, Shang-Chi, and these other ones, at least there was moments in there that made me excited for what's to come in the future, and that made me excited for what I was seeing on screen. I never had that in Thor, man. It was just frustrating disappointment after just disappointment. I think it may be. I need to watch Dark World again, because honestly, there's moments in Thor: The Dark World that I have that to me elevated above this one. The single scene of when Thor is visiting Loki after their mother died, and he's like got this appearance of being fine, and then it changes after he leaves, and he's this mess in the corner. Fucking phenomenal! Like that scene alone was better than anything Thor Thor did. It is. It's, and that's in the Dark World. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, that was what I considered the worst MCU movie for a long time until now. I don't know. Maybe it still is the worst. It may be.
I need to rewatch it. It's been so long.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the thing is, I liked it better than Thor 1 when I first watched it, just because I did. But then, like, I think I've wisened up a little bit. I like Thor 1 way better. Yeah, so we're starting number 5
they
here.
They had more honest emotion in Thor 2 than they had in Thor one we got. Sorry, that was my last little aside.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. And even I wasn't even thrilled with the direction of Ragnarok, even though I still love it.
No, but it still had some moments of like real emotion. Like
no, you're right. You're right. I mean,
dealing with
something too is that
death of a father or like that stuff is like it works really well in their films.
It does. You're right. It does. And I mean, Hemsworth is even the way he's been talking. He kind of said this also at the end of Ragnarok, but it really feels like he kind of felt the temperature after this one.
Well, didn't he also just get that diagnosis that he has like the pre-Alzheimer's gene or something? Is it that him?
He did, yeah.
That was just recently, and he said he's taking a break now.
was through. Yeah, I think he did it through the filming of. Uh, I can't think of what the show's called. On Disney Plus, it's his that
Oh yeah,
Darren Aronofsky shot. It's not Succession, but it's something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know what it's called. Um, yeah, he is, but yeah,
It'll be
I'm
interesting
curious.
what they do with that character in the future because they've kind of dug themselves a bit of a hole with him. I
Well,
think.
they did his end game. I mean, they should have done they
Yep.
should do next time what they should have done this time, which is make a Lord of the Rings epic Viking kind of movie.
Yes.
So they should have done with the God Butcher, but
Yep.
here we are, and have
Here we
him
are.
have three versions of him team up against him, together, or whatever. Which Spider Man kind of did that now, but whatever. Um,
If
so
it works, I don't care. Do it again.
yeah, I mean it could be cooler than the Spider Man one if they done it right, but my number five here is kind of hard actually. I
Yeah.
don't really know if I have a good answer for this.
Okay.
I was kind of bouncing between Moon Knight and Loki, but I
Are these
feel
in
like
order of like preference?
no, yeah, number five is let's go like our least favorite to our favorite, and I say least favorite.
Right.
These are still our five favorite moments of the MCU Phase Four. I'm just going to say maybe the Loki glorious purpose moment, and
Mm.
glorious
Yeah.
purpose, and like they're in the one of the multiversal places, at the end
Mm-hmm.
of time, whatever, like that kind of mixed in with like the introduction of Kang. Like I those are kind of two different episodes, but I just think some of that stuff is really fascinating and fun. And again, that one could be easily switched out with like Oscar Isaac and any of his scenes as Moon Knight. Yeah, but I, for some reason, that was the first thing that popped in my head when I was kind of
Yeah.
thinking of number five here. So, what's your number five
My number five is Patrick Stewart and John Krasinski in Doctor
Dang.
Strange 3
thing? That's a
or
good
2.
one.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I can't recommend the whole movie because I think it's largely problematic. And I'll even say like the reason they're so low is because I feel like once they got on screen, I actually was a little bit disappointed like what they did with them. I wish they'd done maybe
yeah,
some more or something, but still seeing Patrick Stewart at least one more time and seeing him in the yellow chair, seeing John Krasinski, just that first moment of seeing them was like that's just something that sticks out to me when I think of like
sure.
recent MCU. Like that moment was really, really cool. And I think it's a testament that like it sticks out, even though I feel like everything around that moment was pretty poor. But
No, I mean, I think that, I mean, maybe besides Spider Man, I think the hype for Doctor Strange is just out of this fucking world because our expectations were so
Yeah.
big. And I even when we got that, it was a little bit of validation. Like, okay, we're not complete idiots.
Yeah.
Like we were right about something. And I do think it would be unfortunate if this was Patrick Stewart's last. That's his last.
Man, he's
First of all, it
getting
don't
so
matter.
old, man.
He's
Like I
done
just
so many great moments as him. So it's like if he did 15 more and they're all
I
bad,
just
it's like whatever. He did great, but like I hope that he gets one more chance to do
every
something
time
cool.
I see him in like real life, I feel like he's more bones than he was the last time I saw. Like he's getting that. He's like in his late 80s, right, or something like that, or in his 80s.
Yeah,
Maybe?
I think he's
80s.
early 80s, late
But
70s. Yeah,
like
he's getting up
I
there.
just honestly I don't have a lot of hope that we'll ever see him again, just because like when can they get him in the schedule if is he still going to be around then? Is he still going to be around in 4 or 5 years when they actually do shoot an X-Men movie or something?
Yeah. Well,
I don't know.
Also, I don't know. I don't think I don't think he was on set for. I don't think any of them were on set
I
together.
don't think so
Besides,
either.
maybe,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is movie making.
It told.
The Marvel method. Number four for me. This is something I still go back and watch every couple months, which is when Sam Wilson become Captain America, and
Oof.
it's whenever he, particularly. This is my five favorite like coolest moments, right? So particularly whenever he is flying next to the helicopter and he, throws the shield, it bounces off, and he goes through the helicopter and catches. That's just badass. You know what I'm saying? Like that
Yeah.
was like a cool, like okay, like to me, this is like it's one of the best passing of the torches in the MCU, if not the best they've done so far, and also like rightfully so.
Yeah.
And even if the show around Sam Wilson was not that great at times, Sam Wilson was always great.
He was easily the
And
best part of that show. easily.
Yeah.
Him and
And ever
Bucky
since-
were both really good, even though
They were.
the plot around them sometimes failed them, but they, in their own right, were fantastic.
They were, and I stand by, like, I think most of these things should have been a movie, but I think we're going to get that movie now in the next Captain America: New World Order, with
that'll be
Harrison
interesting.
Ford as General Thunderbolt Ross,
That'll be
which I'll
interesting.
hopefully, it will be interesting. So that's my number 4 is when Captain America resurfaced.
Yeah, so my number 4, as it's a little bit like yours, but I'm kind of doing it again. The last 2 episodes of Loki, I think for me,
Sure.
were some of my
Wow.
favorite moments in the MCU recently, just because easily like in the Disney Plus shows, but just in general, I think those episodes made the universe feel so giant and temporal and cosmic, and it just felt like every possibility for where this world and story could go. Like I just felt like a magical moment of like, let's open up another. It almost felt like when we first saw Guardians, and it was like, this is just a brand new part of the universe that nothing is like. You know what I mean? And that's a bit what that felt to me. It's darker than Guardians, right? It's more. It's a bit like got hints of like it's a bit more gray. You know, I feel like Guardians are pretty much like, they live in this fantastical world, but there's pretty clear good and evil. And then like you got this Loki world where everything's like moralistically nebulous, and then you're introducing these ideas of time. It's just to me, all of that was just like magic to me. I really loved all of that.
No, I think you're right. That's interesting. It's in your top 5 as well, because one thing I kind of keep thinking about is we've been hard on the MCU lately, and again, rightfully so. But at the beginning of Phase 4, even though there was things that I think it was more our fault in terms of expectations, I mean, WandaVision, talk about water cooler talk. Even Loki, though Loki wasn't the show I thought I was going to get, initially.
WandaVision, like everyone, non-MCU fans were talking about.
Oh man,
it felt like
the ultimate.
It felt like Game of Thrones a little bit. Like when Game of Thrones is on, and every week you've got 10 different articles dissecting what could be going on or what's going to happen next, and like there's a million fan theory. Like WandaVision took over the zeitgeist more than any other Disney Plus show has managed to do.
Yeah, and it has that J.J. Abrams mystery box aspect to it, right? Where you just don't know what the hell's going on. Yeah, and I think if our expectations were tempered, at least mine, not expecting Patrick Stewart to show up or Magneto to show up or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
I still really liked the way that we stuck the landing, on that show for the most part, and with White Vision.
I'm gonna take an opportunity to just go ahead and do my 3, because my 3 is WandaVision.
Okay.
And man, I just echoing everything you're saying. As a piece of, I think it is the best total show that has been on any of the Disney Plus. Like as a movie, as a show, from being strong from beginning to end, I don't think there's anything that competes with it. The consistency. Of course, there is a few moments that like felt burning to us, like the Evan Peters. What was his name? Actually,
Ralph fucking Boner.
Long
dude.
Dick Johnson. Okay, Ralph Boner.
Long Dick Johnson is better, honestly.
That's true. Yeah. But I am increasingly suspicious that they're going to come back around and fix that. Whether it was planned that way from the beginning, I don't know. But I have a very strong feeling that Ralph Boner will end up actually being Quicksilver, or was all along, or something. I think that's too ripe for the plucking to like fix what I would consider kind of a gaffe that they had in terms of their marketing and how they were setting. To be fair, the marketing we were getting during that show was skyrocketing expectations, and that wasn't our fault. And there's a marketing department at Disney that went too far, and
and Paul Bettany, I've always wanted to work with this actor.
Yeah, oh man, I know,
bastard.
I know that was probably the worst one, because it just. Yeah.
Everyone's looking through his IMDb. He's never worked with Ian McKellen before.
I know, man. I know. I remember all of that. But at the end of the day, like the intrigue, how every episode feels so different, and they lean into these tropes of TV so well. There's all this like meta fourth wall stuff in it. It's got this great like. I love the whole thing of like they're in this perfect world and they're trying to figure. I love Vision trying to figure out what's going on and why things aren't making sense.
It's a masterclass in acting, also from both Paul Bettany and even and from Elizabeth Olsen, 100%.
Oh my god, yeah, she's fantastic. I mean, I liked Wanda as a character before the show. After the show, I was like top 3, maybe. Like she is really cool, and I think again, the way they used this show to explore something real like grief was just. There was just such a deft hand in it. Nothing felt too on the nose or like they were trying to shove some sort of happy boat answer on top of this. It was just like, let's explore what would happen if a superpowered person that had the power to change anything in their reality lost the only person in the world that like truly cared for them or they cared about. And I think it works so well. And I think they've yet to meet the standard of WandaVision on Disney Plus MCU, but yeah, it was phenomenal.
No, it's yeah, I know. I was looking up while you were saying that. I couldn't think of his line, but it's Vision's line to Wanda about what is grief, but like
heart,
an yeah,
something
yeah,
about
something.
Yeah. What is grief, but proof that you still like they're still in your heart or something that you still.
Oh, what is grief if not love persevering?
Yeah,
and it's like what a so fucking phenomenal thing. You know what I'm saying? Like that, and on top of even I brought this up last weekend. We were talking about restoring cars or something with my stepdad Kenny. I was like, yeah, it's like WandaVision, where they're talking to each other like the ship of a thesis, and it's
yeah.
What and like just that scene alone, I could watch just them in the library circling each other talking.
Yeah,
I could watch, for like ever. So like you're not wrong. Like and that's the thing too. One reason I wanted to do this list is because I wanted to celebrate and remember, hey, there was things about Phase 4 we did love and enjoy, and it kind of feels a little bit like in the beginning of the phase and less so at the end. For me, even though Black Panther, maybe on your list, I don't know. I'm sure it's on the list for a lot of people, but I still find a lot to love about the MCU still. So my number 3 is definitely tied to WandaVision in a way, and it's Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness, and I think awesome. Like where it's not the movie itself; it's one particular thing about the movie, but where the movie failed greatly was in my opinion, it's like its view of Wanda or like her arc after WandaVision, and I think like all that was pretty not great for the most part. Even how they ended her story and just like I don't mind her going the extra mile to get her kids back. I just think that I don't know. I think that on top of Strange's arc just didn't work for me overall. But one thing I did like was Sam Raimi's touch of Evil Dead in the movie, particularly one of my favorite things I think about in Phase 4 a lot. It just kind of sticks in my mind is Zombie Strange. That's my number 3 is I love it when he comes back into the world. He looks like a Deadite from the Evil Dead universe, which is what Sam Raimi created. And he's got multiple arms and hands and he's fighting Wanda. Like to me, that's one of the coolest things that any of the heroes have done in the MCU. And so I think that's really badass of Doctor Strange to do that. And I hope we get more crazy, weird shit like that in the future.
Yeah. It's an interesting movie because there's a lot of it that bugs me about it, but there are things that are really cool, and like the dimension hopping stuff, the magical kind of stuff is really, really cool. And I think
the musical fight,
Oh yeah, man, I forgot about that. That was a really, really cool thing. Yeah, that movie feels very unique because of those kind of Sam Raimi-isms everywhere sprinkled within. I mean, he's a fight with Danny Elfman almost.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I do agree with you. I think my big issue with how they did Wanda in that is that at the end of WandaVision, we saw her coming back to herself, and the next time we see her, she's gone full evil. And there's just there was no. They should have shown us that progression. If that's what was going to happen, that should have been a part of the movie or a prequel to them. Like that should have been in there in some way, and that would have made it feel more satisfying. It just felt like a big leap for her character, and it felt dissatisfying because it felt like the end of WandaVision didn't matter in terms of like what she learned or who she became because of
and
it.
also
I
it's
don't
like,
think
where's Vision? You know?
Yeah, exactly. What? Yeah. Were you not aware that White Vision was around and flew off? Like, did no one tell you?
Yeah, and again, why don't you go to a different universe where they lost their Wanda?
That seems like the obvious one to do. Yes.
Holy crap!
But and I will say I don't think there's any chance she's actually dead. Like it's hilarious to me that anyone thinks that she's actually dead. That's not what happened.
No way.
But yeah, I still think, it's such an interesting movie because there's so many little things that are cool about it, but most of them have less to do with the MCU as a whole and more to do with like Sam Raimi as a creator and how he makes movies and how he. But yeah, I like.
Yeah, no, I agree. One thing I want to mention real quick, kind of going back to Guardians before we get into our 2 and 1 here, is I noticed James Gunn doing some of the similar techniques he did in Peacemaker and in Suicide Squad in terms of his camera movement and in terms of like specifically like when you see the Rock opening, like the music not a montage, but it's like that band playing. There's things he does with the camera. It's like these, I can't explain it. It's like these it's like these really quick like dolly pan shots he does.
Yeah.
And like he did them on Peacemaker. So they're really interesting shots. And they're not smooth. Typically, they're not perfect like a David Finch kind of dog. They're just like these really rapid kind of things. And it's like he's just really like he's experimenting. You know what I'm saying? It's like he's in this weird. He's just trying to figure out a new style for himself. And I'm like, just like I don't know. I'm not sure I like it, honestly.
Sure.
But anyway, I just want to bring that up.
Sure.
It made my ass hurt thinking about it. Daniel, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is my last 2 are. We'll see how you feel about them, but they are what they are, and I'm not changing them. Number 2 is Willem Dafoe on his own in Spider-Man No Way Home. I think we'll get to the last act in a minute, but I think if you took that movie and you removed all the other Spider-Man but Tom Holland, but it was still the same plot as far as Willem Dafoe, even Doc Ock, I still think that's a fantastic movie. And like his performance on there, I think Willem Dafoe set a like Heath Ledger set a bar in terms of like villain acting, right? Like in The Dark Knight, and I felt like Heath Ledger was like Willem Dafoe was coming in being like, let's remind everyone what a really good villain looks like and acts like on screen. Like let's remind everyone that you can do like how much difference it makes having someone like Willem Dafoe in that role. And I just think every time he's on screen, I'm like filled with, my brain gets dopamine. You know what I mean? Because it's just like it's nostalgia hitting me in a really nice way, and then also he's just bringing his all to the role, and it just comes through, and it's a really, really good. Just Willem Dafoe on his own, I think, is worth praise.
I think you're 100%. You're not wrong. You can make all 5 of these. Just any scene he's in that movie. Honestly, I went back and I watched all these Spider-Man movies beforehand. I didn't need to. I've seen them all literally.
You just rewatched recently?
Well, before the new one come out, I watched them again.
Okay.
And I was watching, Willem Dafoe in the first movie, and he's in 2, and he's also in 3. And in small parts. And I was like, man, he's, people forget how good of an actor he was in this movie. And like, it's a different, you bring up Heath Ledger, it's a different type of villain. I think one thing that me and Matt has been saying for a long time, and Heath Ledger kind of falls into this in a way, but it's okay. He does in a lot of ways, but it's okay for a villain to just be a fucking villain. Like, they don't have to be like a Killmonger. They don't have to be someone who's tragic or has a past. I mean, he is tragic in a lot of ways. He's like a Jekyll and Hyde. But what makes him so cool in that movie is just how fucking like nonstop he is in terms of his quest to get what he wants. And like at anyone's, behest, So I think like when he turns on the Goblin persona, that's it. It's like you're done, like the fight with him and Peter.
Listen, we're going to get to the last act of that movie and everything that's amazing about it. But when he says, what is his line when he says, Norman's on sabbatical.
Sabbatical,
Oh
honey.
my god! Like that line and that look he does alone is just like I'm getting goosebumps just remembering
Sure.
a single
I want to watch
line
it right
he
now.
gives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that when you can get goosebumps remembering a line of dialogue, man,
Yeah.
like that's the level of performance he brought. Like Norman's
did,
on.
he killed
I
it.
could get a tattoo called Norman's on sabbatical, honey, and like I don't know. I just love that line so much. It's just it's
Best
one of
line
those
of
lines
MC
that when whoever
baseball.
wrote that, they just sat back and said, "Yep, there's no better line that could be."
Yeah.
in that
Huh. I did it.
Yeah.
Well, I weirdly brought
Oh.
this up because I was doing the whole internet thing the other day, like I do, and someone was talking about like, man, Tom Holland's got to fight Green Goblin in the, in the MCU. Like, where's Norman at in the MCU? And I was just like, man, it's just one of those things. Like, as much as I agree in a lot of ways, like I want to see Norman show up, and I want to see him lead the
Yeah.
Dark Avengers and all these other things. And it would even be interesting because like he knows who Norman's supposed to turn into,
Yeah.
right? And without him turning into it yet. So that would be some interesting, like
It would
he
be.
knows ahead of time. And maybe him trying to stop it beforehand actually ends up creating him some way.
That would make a lot of sense. That's where I would go, at least initially. That sounds like a great direction to start.
I don't have the worst ideas. But
No.
at the same time, you're like, man, like who do you get other than Willem Dafoe to play it? You know what I'm saying? Like they just did it. Like they just gave you the best Green Goblin movie, and like what? And Green Goblin just did the worst thing he possibly could
Yeah.
he killed Aunt May. Like,
Okay,
what else
let
do you
me
do?
throw this out there. Let me throw this out there it would be a redesign of the character. It would be a retelling of him, but a
Sure.
young Norman Osborn. What if they casted? Hold on, I gotta look up his name so I don't get. Kieran Culkin from.
Kieran Culkin.
He's on
Succession?
Succession. Yes.
I would
I
kill
don't-
myself if he
Really?
was Norman
I mean,
Osborn.
I guess I could see him growing into it. Like they cast him as like he's Norman Osborn, hasn't
He's
created
an
Oscorp
adult.
yet. Hasn't created
No.
Oscorp yet. But if we're doing like a different timeline, what if he hasn't created Oscorp yet? What if that happens by the end of one of those movies? I just feel like he's like one of those like rich. He just plays like a rich guy really well, and like kind of like a rich insecure person really well. And I could just see that a rich insecure person who gets jaded and then turns into this kind of maniacal evil rich person.
I mean, when you started bringing it up, like even when you said Culkin, my brain went to who's the guy that had. Well, no, who's the guy that's in Succession? It's not the main guy, but it's like the sister's husband who gets not fucked over.
Oh, yeah.
He's running the parks or whatever.
Yeah. The guy that's like an idiot, like that's kind of like.
But I think like he actually could do a pretty, or even the brother, like the main guy in Succession, probably could be a pretty good Norman
Jeremy
Osborn.
Strong. Yeah, I could see him. I don't know. There's something about like
He has the look.
he has a good look. I guess I feel like.
What about John Hamm? John Hamm as Norman Osborn.
I like John Hamm, but every time I see him, I feel like he's being himself in everything. I don't feel like the guy acts very much. I feel like Madman John Draper was just John Hamm. It felt like, and then we just like everything else. He just sounds like how he sounds and everything else.
Gotcha.
To me, it would just be hard not to see Don Draper every time I would see it. But he has the look. He has the look and the charisma.
Yeah,
of the,
he
like,
does.
don't fuck with me. I just think if we do a different version of Norman, if we do like a young Norman, that he's going to get older and like stuff.
Well, it's interesting because it sounded like there wasn't, he hasn't created Oscorp yet in the MCU, so it kind of feels like they did it. I just don't know that they're going to do him again for the next any time of Holland's tenure as
I think
Spider-Man.
Again, they could start introducing him, but it would make more sense if he was like younger and they like this is a guy that Peter meets that we're not going to deal with him for like 2 more movies. You know what I mean? Like let's introduce him early. They should do that. You're right.
They should do that.
Yes.
I mean, I'm for it. I don't know. I don't know if they will because what was Feige's answer to like who can play Doc Ock? He's like, no one can but Alfred Molina. And then he took a step further, just went and recasted Alfred Molina. And I think that there's a lot of actors who could play Doc Ock, and that there's a lot of versions of Doc Ock that we haven't gotten yet that are just as good as Alfred Molina version. So I think he's allergic to the idea of, touching some of these people who are kind of like canonized in our heads a little
Icons.
bit.
Which, to be fair, that makes sense knowing what the plot of No Way Home is. Knowing that we get Tobey Maguire. You cannot have Tobey Maguire in the movie and have a recasted Doc Ock. I think that
No, it makes total sense. I just kind of wonder, like, I mean, like, what was the idea for for the first Spider-Man movie? They went and they got the Vulture, right? That was the villain
Character
for
hasn't
Spider-Man
done.
4 that they got pretty far in production.
Which
They just went ahead
I
and
just saw
repurposed it.
recently who was cast as the Vulture in Spider-Man 4.
John Malkovich was the Vulture.
I like John Malkovich. That would have been interesting.
No, dude, that's like when I heard that back in like 2010, I was like, that's the best fucking casting of my life. I think it's an amazing idea. He can be ruthless. John Malkovich can be fucking mean, dude.
Yeah.
And I thought that was he looks more like the Vulture than Michael Keaton did.
He does.
And
because he's bald, probably part of it.
Exactly. And he's a good actor. Michael Keaton did a great job. I'm very happy with that.
Michael fucking Keaton. So
he was. But they've been doing all the villains we haven't gotten yet. That we already gotten in the Amazing series and the Toby series.
I hear you.
They're kind of running out now of characters. They've done Venom, but they're going to probably do their own. I don't know what the fuck they're going to do.
MCU has not done Venom.
I agree. Well, in my opinion, no one's done Venom. But
yeah, they just don't exist. Like, he's only existed in comics, but can they finally bring him over to the big screen?
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I love the idea that's floating around. I don't know if they'll do it, but it's Daredevil and Spider-Man team up to fight Kingpin. It's like a street level movie. It's like he's in college now. It's street level. It's more like they should bring it down after.
That sounds like a great way to do like it would almost feel like a buddy cop movie without being cops. Like, make a buddy cop movie with Spider-Man and Daredevil versus Kingpin. And
it's a great idea.
Like, that almost feels a little bit like Captain America Winter Soldier, right? It's just an amazing espionage film. That's why it works. You know what I mean? Just make an amazing buddy cop film, but put the cops in superhero costumes.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea, I think, because he's into Hawkeye, Kingpin. He's going to be in Echo. He's going to be in Daredevil Born Again. And the idea kind of is like, this is finally him being taken down is fighting Spider-Man and Daredevil together. And they've already set up Daredevil with the last movie. I think it's kind of what you should do. And then also maybe tee up the black suit at the end of that, or in Secret Wars or something. Bring in Miles Morales.
Hey man, I would love it if he got the black suit halfway through and they didn't deal with that till the next movie. Like why can't we do? I feel like that's what I want more of, and I felt like we got so much of earlier on. Was like, it felt like everything was like the seeds were laid so early for what they eventually got to. And maybe they have been too. Maybe we just don't see the seeds yet because we don't know exactly where they're going. So,
well, I still think my ultimate fix-all, again, this is me doing better than them. Probably it's like all the stuff we did. I mean, no matter what, the universe will be reset in about 5 years. No matter what, we're in a new universe MCU. So I can already right now in 5 years tell you that future Donovans will say, all your problems, Donovan, were fixed because this is the new universe now. You can just erase all those problems.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be so cool to be like, it turns out that most, or if not all, these Disney Plus shows, they're all their own. They're separate universes. All the inconsistencies. Yeah, I think there's something about that. I don't think that they will do that, but no matter what, we're gonna have a new universe in 5 years.
I think it's a very good chance after this next arc, which I guess is Secret Wars. Is that what the finale of this one is? There's a good from what you've told me about like what the Secret Wars comic plot is. That seems like it would be a perfect opportunity to reset things if they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean it is, but that's
what happened in the comics, right?
Yeah, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean I think, and that's exciting to me. Like I definitely want to see all my favorite actors and their characters again, and get like that last hurrah, and like get all these characters like their moment on stage, like give them their attention, let us enjoy them. But I'm not gonna lie, there is something exciting to me about a blank slate, and where would they even start, and what would they do? You know what I mean? Like there's something intriguing about that.
Well, it's a blank slate, but they're still gonna like. I don't think. I mean, they could easily recast Captain America and have a new actor play. Which I think it'd be cool to like get our legacy characters back, like Iron Man back in some way. Yeah. Here's the big thing too: is like you have to give them some credit. I mean, it's an easy fix all, but like the universe was consistent until Endgame happened, and there's an in-universe logic of like, well, they started fucking with time, and then like also Loki and the TVA, all this is happening at the same time. The Kang and like
Well,
all this, the
essentially,
multiverse explodes. Like,
are we
then
going
the
to
universe?
learn eventually that they actually went to a different dimension instead of back in time in Endgame? Wouldn't that be actually what they did? Is
I
go to a
don't
different
know.
dimension?
It feels like they went to a different time.
But remember, like she said, like when the Master was explaining everything to, or the Ancient One was explaining everything to Hulk, she was like, if you take this, this becomes a new timeline, or maybe that's what she was saying. Like because you take it, it becomes a new timeline. But if you bring it back, it goes
I wrote
back.
this down on a napkin like 3 years ago, and then it it kind of got muddled up because the TVA had their own kind of set of rules in terms of like variances and what that means, because there's it's called the sacred timeline, right? So it's like this is the main timeline, and then any branch beyond that causes the inevitable destruction of the whole timeline through Kang, because Kang is so dangerous multiversally. So so because of that, what ifs happened again. So it's like what's interesting too is like none of these things happen in the way we perceive time. We talked about this before. We talked about this on the Loki podcast. But the way we perceive time. So as soon as one branch starts, it's like everything in the universe that could happen has happened in that moment, because it's not going to happen in a progressive way in which you experience time. It's going to happen infinitesimally at the same time.
That's a big
like
word.
Throughout time at the same time in every time.
What is that word?
Infinitesimal. Infinitesimal may actually mean like it is infinite.
The meaning is immeasurable, an indefinitely small quality.
Okay, the opposite of infinitesimal.
Let's see. It
was a nice word to throw out there for a second until you called me out.
Anonym.
What did I try to say? Infinitesimal? I can't remember. I'm also sick, everybody.
Infinitesimal. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. My nose is clogged up. I can't actually talk. I can't. My spine hurts.
The first option is what's the opposite of infinitesimal? Huge.
Oh, good. Well, there's a huge amount of possibilities.
Anti-infinitesimal. There's got to be because infinitesimal is such a nice fancy word. You sound so.
You like
smart.
that? I learned that from.
You sound so smart when you say it.
Thank you. I learned it from shooting a movie with Johnny Brandon, and and Carrie Michael taught him the word, and then I learned the word from her. Infinitesimal. And the reason why that was brought in retrospect, the reason why it was taught was because he was trying to think of a word that was with a definite amount of time, and she said use infinitesimal, and so I used it incorrectly in my speech. So, but it sounded good.
But
you know what? Until now.
We all learned today. We all
there. You go.
And even you guys at home, listen to the pod. You just learned what infinitesimal means, and you know what? Congratulations.
You're all better for it now. But anyway, it's just like as soon as that happens, like what if, like everything you saw in what if happened at that moment. You know what I'm saying? Like
right.
It's like it's hard to describe, but it's like
well, the problem is they're dealing with impossible ideas that all by nature of logic conflict and could not be true.
Right. So exactly.
It's this thing of like they're having to like wave a magic wand and be like, no, it all works. When like if we break it down, it can't work. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they got a mountain to climb in terms of making it all feel sensical and work. But
yeah. I mean, the way the end game worked is they kind of had their cake and ate it too. Like they went back in time, got the stones, and then they created variances from that.
Then went back in time.
Yeah, the stone thing is more about stability in the timeline. They're like anchors in the timeline, not really stopping like they do create branches in time from being removed, but they're not the only thing that can create branches in time, from what I understand.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And it is get complicated for sure
It is.
because because it's not fucking real. That's why it gets complicated.
Exactly. The problem is they're trying to make it feel like it makes sense when it can't. Like in reality, it never will. So it's
Right.
it is difficult. I don't envy them on that part of it.
Yeah, well, we've danced around it, but I think it's safe to say that both of our number one.
Wait, what
and
was
I
your
just
number? What was officially your number 2?
Oh, Shang-Chi gets the 10 rings.
Yeah, you didn't talk about that one. Okay.
Yeah, that whole it's that moment when he gets the rings. It's that
Yeah.
fight between his legacy and his father,
Yeah.
and what his father thinks is right, and what his father wants, and what is in pain, and then him accepting, it's accepting his lineage, but also accepting like his duty and like where his place in the world is. And I think just Shang-Chi is a huge important character to me because my dad liked the character so much.
Yeah.
And I think visually, it's just one of the coolest things in the MCU is him having the rings and flowing around him like a Kamehameha, Dragon Ball Z kind of thing, and then him fighting the dragon and him running up the dragon, and then like putting all the rings in it, and then I mean that's fucking sick, dude.
It's really cool.
Really cool.
I really love Shang-Chi. If this was a 6-item list, it would probably be number 6. And honestly, I could feel like I could flip it with some of these lower item ones, and like it's such a consistent movie. It's one of those that knew exactly what it wanted to be and nailed it. The fight choreography is just it's so fun. Like the movie is enjoyable just for the choreography. You know what I mean? And I agree with you. I think the themes of family were really solid.
Yeah, and Destin Creighton, I think he's going to direct the King Dynasty, so that's nice, So
well, he can.
It's
that gives me hope.
It does because it seems like he's a good director. He visited Arkansas a few years back, and I think he shot a movie in Arkansas, or he did something. He was at Little Rock Film Festival. Yeah. So anyway, my number one, I think it's your number one too. I put Spider-Man is what I put.
I put the last act just because that's kind of when it all happens. But yeah, I mean, we have the same one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is. Here, let me cough real quick. You talk about how great it is.
Go for it. I mean, I think for me, there's when we talk in terms of nostalgic value and what IPs or characters have nostalgic value. For me personally, there's none other than Spider-Man is the peak. I love that, man. I watched the animated series when I was a kid, but like my first TV show I could never miss was Spider-Man on Saturday morning cartoons. And they play his show on the local Fox channel on Saturday mornings, and I would never miss it. It was it was the first time I can remember knowing when a TV show started and being there every time.
Same.
Yeah, and so and then of course the Tobey Maguire movies are just they were some of the highlights of those years for me, and just the first 2 Spider-Man movies, still some of my favorite films. And so. You bring in Tobey Maguire, you bring in Andrew Garfield, which I don't dislike, but I don't have as much nostalgic, personal tie to him. And, it would be one thing if they just brought them in and gave us a serviceable story. But to bring them in and tell a really good story, to have almost constant fan service and it feel good and not like you're just giving us candy, or it feels like you're doing this in a way that makes sense with the story, that isn't stopping the plot to do this. And I just feel like the moment when they regroup in on the
Peter
Statue
1,
of Liberty,
Peter 2, Peter 3,
and then they go beat everyone's ass, it's just, and when they swing on each other,
next
I'm
level.
Getting chills again. You know what I mean? There's just. It's almost it almost felt like adult me and kid me and teenager me all teaming up to go kick at life's ass. You know what I mean? It just, there was this moment of I never thought I would see this ever, and I get to watch it, and it's good. Not only good, it's great. I could
awesome.
ramble, I could gush, I could keep gushing, but I'll let you.
No, I like to hear you gush, Daniel. I think I love soda, and I stopped drinking it for about 2 years there, just
Sure.
because because of the pandemic, and I was like, I only want to drink soda if I'm at a movie, like a special
Sure.
event kind of thing. And then I had no doubt that this movie would be special, so I drank my
Yeah.
first soda in 2 years for this movie, and I wasn't wrong. And I mean, seeing Tom Holland's Peter, learn with great power comes great responsibility,
Mm.
not only through his Aunt May, but also through a legacy of Willem Dafoe, which was your number two, but
Yeah.
through these other two Spider-Man that we've grown up with, particularly
Yeah.
Toby. And I mean, Spider-Man 1 and Back to the Future for most of my life has been my favorite movie of all time, like tied.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until recently that I've changed that, but I even then it's like it's really just answers whatever I've watched recently. Between
Sure.
that,
Sure.
Back to the Future and True Lies is like what have I watched recently?
Yeah.
And that first Spider-Man movie has absolutely shaped me in every way in terms of what I like, and I mean it's why I do the podcast today is that
Yeah.
first Spider-Man movie,
Me too.
100%. And it's I bought Spider-Man comics beforehand, but it's why there's 30 Spider-Man comics sitting right here next to me, and
Yep.
I just like the TV show, everything. So like, those movies are hugely important to me, and I've seen them, a god awful amount of times, and I've done I spent a lot of time with those characters, and to see them come back together and not only give us the nostalgia, but like you said, to teach the new generation, teach the new Peter, like what it means to be Spider-Man. Like that was the thing I kind of complained about for those first two movies was that
Mm.
this is a Spider-Man that hasn't had to go through the grief yet, not in a large way like the other ones always had. Like that was what made Spider-Man Spider-Man. And then to learn it from yourself is like it's poetic in a lot of ways. And not only
Yes.
that, like I got to go through and I got to rewatch Spider-Man 1 and 2 and 3 and Amazing 1 and 2 with Noah.
Mm.
I got to watch those with him too, leading up to this movie.
Yeah.
Like I got to show it. So it's like that movie also gives that to people too. It gives us
Yeah.
the ability to show, like to kind of prep our, you don't have to. It's fun without it, but it's fun to prep your kids to like show them the generation, like the gap, and to show here's my Spider-Man and you have yours and I have mine.
Yep.
And now they're teaming up, So like that's something super special. And that's,
I agree.
it's one of those things like we will get again a similar thing on I say similar, an identical thing, but on a much larger canvas with Secret Wars. That's what Secret Wars is all
Right.
about.
Yes.
So we'll get to get that again, but it's we'll see how we feel. I don't know if we'll feel the same way we did when
It's going to be a
Toby
lot
walked
harder with 80 characters to do it right than with.
Well, it's like it's enough that 100%. Another thing too is it's like a rat hitting the dopamine thing. It's like when you do it so many times, it's not as good as that first
Yes.
hit.
Yep.
So like we're gonna Endgame happened. We saw it. We saw the best thing ever in the MCU, and we saw Infinity War. We saw Endgame, and I say that we saw, and then Spider-Man: No Way Home is Spider-Man's Endgame. Like that could have ended, and it perfectly ended his character story where. We even thought for a brief period, like Spider-Man could not be in the MCU anymore, and it would kind of make sense in a lot of ways.
Right.
And so I don't know if they can keep topping themselves, especially with the state of the universe as it is right now. They need to do some serious leg lifting to get me emotionally prepared to feel the same way I did with Endgame.
We're at a really interesting point, I feel like, with superhero cinema and this kind of. I was talking to my uncle at Thanksgiving, and I was telling him I feel like we're at this point where we don't know if we've peaked, if the genre has peaked yet. It may have. Endgame could have been the peak, and like we may never see the kind of hype and like massive interest in an MCU product like we did there. And I think I think you talk about we're living in the heroic age of cinema, and I think that's a great title for like this era. But superhero movies kind of take the place of what we used to get with action films and a lot of other even kind of genre movies, and I don't think that's sustainable forever. I don't think that the world is going to only want superhero flavored anything forever. I think this era has cemented that superhero movies will never go away.
Right.
Ever. They will
Right.
be a genre and they will never stop because it prints money in some audiences and some characters. But it's going to be interesting to watch over the next few years. Can Secret Wars, can it eclipse Endgame? Because if it can't, then we would say, well, yeah, if we looked at this historically, Endgame was the peak in terms of like popularity, in terms of everyone was watching it, everyone was talking about it, it took over the internet. There was nothing else but Endgame for a while. And we could be eventually talking about that. Well, that was the peak and then it declined. And then by the end of the 2020s, it kind of changes this other thing. We're just at it. Historically, it's fun, I think, for me to kind of just be watching and analyzing and kind of just wondering
100%.
at what stage in this era are we? Because it won't last forever. I think 10, 15, 20 years is probably the most that we'll get of just like peak superhero cinema. I feel like, we obviously got the Spider-Man in like early 2000s, but it wasn't until like Iron Man and I would even throw in like The Dark Knight, because that came out the same year, that superhero cinema started taking over.
Spider-Man 3, it grossed almost 900 million at the box office, which is pretty incredible. It was the highest grossing superhero movie of all time.
But it also got
come out
critically and fan-wise, it was not.
No, I know. I'm
loved.
saying that was 2007, and then 2008 was Dark Knight and Iron Man, where it's like, okay, now here's Batman Begins come out 2000, five area, and like amazing movie, maybe the best super movie of all time. Not sure. Dark Knight.
It didn't do numbers like Dark Knight.
No, I mean like 400 million max. And then Dark Knight comes along and it makes $1 billion. Literally right at $1 billion. I think $1.012 billion. So like it come out and did that, and then a few short months before that, Iron Man comes out, and it's like all of a sudden superhero movies are starting to kind of have like a grounded kind of approach, and then from there, MCU starts building out like it's grounded.
It starts building to the Avengers. I mean, like that was
the Avengers.
We didn't know. I didn't know. I knew that they were going to make an Avengers movie. I was not aware of anything beyond that, or that they had planned anything beyond that. Like I remember it was probably 2010, 2011 when I first kind of, we saw this stinger in Iron Man, but you also think like, will that actually happen? Are they actually going to get there? Because like they have to make a Thor movie I guess they already made Hulk, a Captain America movie. They had to do all these other things to even get there. And it was like, okay, well, that's kind of a fun idea, but I don't know if it'll actually happen. And then it finally happened. And like, it is interesting to kind of be like, okay, so I think 2007, 2008 could be a good area to call the beginning, or like when people started to realize, holy shit, these can be the most profitable movies of all time. Maybe these genre movies.
Yeah. Spider-Man really did have a foothold in 2002. It made like $750 million.
But I guess my only thing with that is that was the only thing going on with Spider-Man at the time.
Yeah, and
X-Men, but
X-Men was never touching the numbers that Spider-Man was doing ever.
No. And I liked the early X-Men movies fine.
Yeah. And Batman 89 made a fuck ton of money from like $400 million in 89, which is crazy.
But I guess I think of like that 2007, 2008 area, because like that's when they started working on Man of Steel, I think, even because when it came out in 2010, you know what I mean?
That period there,
that's when everyone wanted a superhero movie. Everyone wanted a superhero franchise or character for them.
Well, Spider-Man was being rebooted to match the Dark Knights with Andrew's Spider-Man. MCU was taking off the Great Experiment, and then all those things kind of.
Then we had the X-Men reboots were happening right around then too. Like
First Class was 14, I still think
2014.
Yeah, I still think is probably the best X-Men movie is First Class, all those things are kind of happening at once, and I think there's a good argument to be made. There's always like
I guess my argument is like that's the point when people started saying, no, we're not going to do action movie, we're going to do a superhero movie. Because like even though Spider-Man and X-Men was around, they kind of felt like anomalies. Like, well, of course Spider-Man did that. It's Spider-Man. You know what I mean?
No, I see what you're saying.
And then you've got Iron Man pulling in numbers. You've got Captain America pulling in numbers. It just felt like, so if if we guess that that's around that, then we're like what, almost 15 years into this era. So how much more is left? That's an interesting question. But I mean, I could see 5 more years of 20-year period, and maybe by the end of the 2020s, things are getting phased out, or just we're seeing less and less. But
I think we have about 10 years, maybe 15 more years.
I think if they find another peak, yes. I think.
Well,
or
I think
if someone comes in and replaces the Marvel peak, like a James Gunn led DCU.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think that our only hope for that, if we want this great experiment to continue, is the DCU, because I still think I've maintained this from the beginning that the DC universe is more interesting. It can be more interesting than the MCU,
Sure.
but they just haven't cracked that egg yet. And when they do, if they do, that's the big if. James Gunn them could be. That everyone's like, oh, they're the saviors, and maybe they are, but it's like they've done this 6 times now in the last 6-7 years, and so it's like,
it feels like they have people in charge that I trust more than ever.
Sure,
but the task in front of them is gargantuan, and so many things have to go right that has nothing to do with them, or they can't have direct control over,
right,
to make this all work. And so it is that thing of like, I mean, James Gunn. It's probably one of the best guys you could get for this. And so you're setting yourself up potentially to do something good. But I'll say creatively, I think it's probably the best guy you could get to be the creative driving force.
Well, besides us. Sorry.
Well, I mean, if you can't get us, James Gunn's a nice, appetizer. But I just feel like they've got their hand feels a little more stacked than they've had in a while. For me personally, for how I feel about the DCU, it'll be really interesting. I mean, The Flash is a big movie, and what happens after it will be very interesting. And
that whole thing is interesting. I don't know. Hey, there's no bigger fan than the guy sitting right here across from you, Daniel. But I just, I'm curious. I daydream about the end game moment for the DC universe all the time, and I can't wait. I mean, I like Black Adam better than almost all these other MC movies this year. Not even because I like Black Adam, but just because like my expectations were a little lower for his movie versus the others, and also it's like you can't. It's like trying to break an egg that's already got cracks in it. It's like, well, it's already broken. It's like it doesn't really matter so much. But the MCU has been this perfect golden goose egg, and you don't want to crack that one, So when they start showing up, you're like, damn, it sucks. It was perfect beforehand.
There's a really interesting version of the next few years where the DCU replaces Marvel in the zeitgeist. Like Marvel kind of becomes these background players, or I will say with Bob Iger coming back and Bob Chapek leaving, what the very little rumblings I'd heard about Bob Chapek was that he was like a numbers guy. That was like his
not
thing.
A creative guy,
and he was in a habit of taking power away from creators and giving them to numbers people, producers, kind of thing. And I could see. I mean, there's no way to know, but I mean, the optimistic part of me says, well, that makes sense why the MCU's been dipping and why Star Wars has been struggling so hard, right? Like the wrong people have been making the key decisions. And I will say with especially with some of the Star Wars content, and some of the recent MCU content, it felt like decisions were not being made creatively. They were being made like, how do we market to this audience and make a show
but I don't like. But Boba Fett, Mando season 1 and 2, Obi-Wan, all those shows were in development when Iger was there. Like, what I'm saying? Like it's the timing.
But did they get produced while he was there? I mean, because that could change. I mean, a lot changes from development.
It could, but also
if you're not getting as many Disney Plus subscribers as you need, we need to rush this shit out. I mean, that could have.
It's kind of like being president, though. It's like, it's like this. It's like a president's being blamed in the moment for the economy. It's like, yeah, absolutely. They got some blame, but it's also, but there's also, it's also the previous president's decisions that leaked down a little bit. Sure. I think Chapek. I don't know if we've felt all the ripples of his decisions yet. I think we maybe at the beginning of those ripples. I just don't know yet. I think I still
Yeah,
think Kathleen Kennedy and Feige and I mean, some of those guys. I mean, Kathleen, it ain't like I mean, the most
you're
of
right.
Star Wars in the last 10 years has been under Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger. I don't remember us praising Rise of Skywalker or Force Awakens or Last Jedi or you
I
know what I'm
like
saying?
Force
Like,
Awakens. I praised it when it came
no,
out.
I mean, I did too, but I'm saying like universally, like we
Yes, sure.
did, you
Yes.
know, Rogue One, which is also under Disney, and which is it's also all you know what I'm saying.
But it
I think
does
that's
it not? I mean, I think when we get to Andor, which I'm a few episodes in now, I'm loving it. I can't wait to finish it.
I
Like
can't.
the
I'm
internet is screaming, even if you don't like Star Wars, watching Andor. That's like
exactly.
the general sentiment I see
Well,
from
it's on
people.
Hulu now. It's on, they put the
Oh,
first episode
really?
on ABC channel. Like
Oh, that's
they aired them
interesting.
on live TV so they get
But
more viewers.
but there is something about like even just watching the first few episodes, Andor feels markedly different than
Yeah,
anything else Disney has put on their
it is,
streaming
and it
platform.
was in
Even like
production
I
like
love The Mandalorian,
way
but
longer
this
than
feels better
Obi-Wan.
than The Mandalorian to me. Like in terms of storytelling, how they're like the way they're doing it, it feels like they're taking their time to tell a well-crafted story. They've got
Yeah,
characters that all feel real, feel like they fit, talk like normal ass people in a Star Wars universe. Like it just they're hitting on cylinders that have been so missing from previous. It's just and I know Andor's been in development for so long too. Like it just
yeah, it
makes me
has.
curious. Like how far up the chain did this go? Like what ended up changing? Why couldn't we get Obi-Wan like Andor? Right? Like what
Sure.
why could not we get that method applied to it? And that's the part where I think like, well, yeah, if you've got a
Well,
guy that's been put in charge and like his job is to expedite everything, get it out the door quick, he's gonna say no, don't take extra time to rewrite that or do this scene there. It's gonna be like, no, get it out as soon as possible. We're trying to get numbers up, for
sure.
subscribers.
I
Which he
yeah,
lied
yeah.
about. Chepik lied about, or did something. I was reading an article like he did something where it hid the like they didn't meet their subscriber mark, and he like found a way to kind of like bury the lead with the board. That was somewhat about I think why he got fired. I thought is what I read.
Oh, well, I mean, like, is there part of that? Absolutely. I just don't know. I just don't know. That's
How
my thing.
much? How much did it impact?
I don't know how much. Yeah, and Andor is even a weird one too because it was. I mean that this first season was I think was like 2.5 seasons condensed down into one. Like you know what I'm saying? It
Yeah,
went through multiple. It went through a different showrunner. It went through.
yeah,
I mean, it had way more production problems than Obi-Wan did,
yeah,
and but somehow it's come out the other end as like one of the best, if not the best, Star Wars content we've ever gotten.
yeah,
And I'm I've been waiting just because like time in the podcast and stuff. I'm fixing to start watching them all this week so we can talk about it next week. I'm
yeah.
excited to do that because
Me too.
I'm trying to stay off the internet for spoilers and
Yeah,
stuff, but I'm excited and yeah, I mean it's hard to know. I mean, that's the thing. It's just hard to know what decisions are affecting what films and
yeah.
creators.
You're right.
And Kevin Feige is also one of those things too. It's like he's such a. I know there's that. I know that he bumped heads with Chapek a little bit, but also it's like
Yeah. Well, wasn't it there a rumor that Chepik was trying to take some power away from Feige?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, part of it too is I think Ike Perlmutter, which is like before, like that was like around Avengers, Age of
Okay.
Ultron time period, and then Bob Iger stepped in and said no, like let Feige do Feige, and then we ended up
Was
getting
that when like the
Endgame.
Marvel board went away?
Yeah, exactly. That was that time period, And so I just don't know. I mean, that's just our. I think the MCU's its biggest problem is that they've been stretched too thin by Disney
Yes.
Plus,
Yes.
and I'm hoping that the Marvel presentations are a way of them still meeting a quota of like content, but also quality as well.
I mean, Disney's just gonna have to find enough like more IPs to make like it feels like they only make original Star Wars and Marvel shows. Like
Yeah, and
they just need
Pixar,
to
but
make more other show. I mean, they just need to make more original IP. Feels like.
yeah, I mean that's yeah,
Well,
it's
those aren't even original IP, but you know what I mean.
yeah,
IP
they're
that they
not
own.
exactly. Well, that's the thing is like I feel like just based on some of the reports between just with Disney and then even other things like HBO or Amazon that the game of like spending $200 million on these shows is like almost up. Like this is like a short-lived experiment because it's like I'm not sure yet that it's even Netflix is like they're cutting costs too now.
Yeah.
And so it's like, they got a lot of subscribers, and it's one of those things too. It's like you needed it out of the gate, but also remember the beginning of Disney Plus when you just had WandaVision? It's all we talked about for 8 weeks. It was
WandaVision
WandaVision.
and old Disney movies. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, once you get enough content on there, I don't know. I'm sure that people can argue against that. I think like the library itself almost justifies just having the subscription. And you
Especially
always
if you have
want new
kids.
stuff.
Especially if you have kids.
Exactly.
Disney Plus is probably the best one for kids. Just the
I use
amount
Disney
of
Plus
movies and
now since
TV
I
shows.
moved almost universally just so I can play Moana forever. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all it
Or
exists
Bluey.
for.
I mean, I bet the
Yeah.
amount of Bluey people that got Disney Plus for Bluey parents. I bet there's quite a few.
And and they have to know this information. They have to be like, okay, people are watching Encanto and Moana and Frozen way more than they're watching Moon Knight episode 5. You know what I'm saying? So there has to be
you can't
a
justify
there.
the budget.
There has to be like they can get more repeat viewings for just creating new IP and I don't know. I'm sure there's an argument there against someone to say I'm wrong, but I think there's room for both. But they
just need to make more content made for adults. Because it feels like they make MCU and Star Wars sometimes for adults, sometimes not. But then they just make everything else for like mostly kids or young people. You know what I mean? It's just I think that's what makes me feel like they just lean too hard on the MCU and Star Wars for content. That's why it feels like we're getting so much content and none of it's that great. And that just feel like, well, yeah, because that's the only IPs you're like making anything for right now. It feels
Well,
like.
also,
for our audience, for our age.
Here's the thing too, is that the thing I do like that Chet did that I hope they don't reverse is that he started putting more mature content on Disney Plus. Like there's the Stars label internationally, and like I'm like, yeah, put all the Fox movies, the whole library on Disney Plus, please. Put all of Hulu's shows on Disney.
Oh my
Plus.
God! Put Atlanta.
Please.
Yes. Oh my God! If at any point they decide to just be like, well, all of our stuff's on Hulu and at Disney Plus, my God, I would be so happy. I would be so happy. I hate Hulu.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's just like to me, I don't know. I think it's the smart thing. They have way more content than all the. I mean, now, to be fair, HBO Max has. I keep forgetting. Every time I go on there, I'm like looking for a movie. Like, oh, they have that movie because they have every movie ever. It feels like.
Yeah.
And so I'm really hoping. I'm also hoping Discovery.
Which I mean, who knows what's going to go on with all that stuff? Warner Brothers.
We're still. We forget sometimes. We're still in the streaming wars. We're still.
I mean, it feels like we're at we've. It not jumped the shark, but we're seeing the point where people can't just like throw money at things and win the war. I mean, the Amazon Prime's Lord of the Rings of Power is like all they did was pour money on that and didn't work. You know what I mean? And so like,
yeah, I don't know if
I feel like we're just everyone's so desperate to have the next Stranger Things or Game of Thrones, or just unmissable content. But I mean. Just throwing more money at it obviously doesn't just make it better. So it'll be interesting to see how it keeps panning out.
Well, this went from holiday special to MCU favorite moments to the MCU at large to
talking a little about DCU.
A little bit of everything, everyone. You guys are lucky. You get
streaming wars.
This is a Christmas present of an episode, Daniel.
That's right. I love it. It's all interesting shit. I mean, I feel like if you are at all interested in this like world of it, I love talking about what's on screen, but I also love talking about everything behind the scenes. You know what I mean? Like that's so much fun. And just
I could talk about an hour
or like
DCU. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's our next pod. Like in a couple of weeks, when we're running out of things to watch. Is like, hey, let's talk about the DC and like what they should do to compete with Marvel. You know?
Yep. I love it.
I have some thoughts on that. How can our listeners write into us, Daniel?
Listeners, you can write into bit.ly/2for1mail and let us know what you thought of the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special, or the Marvel in general, or the DCU, or superhero era of cinema, or the streaming wars. But that's it. Nothing else. So bit.ly/2for1mail.
If you comment anything else, we're going to come to your house like Jan Silent Bob does and beat the shit out of you.
That's right.
Exactly. If you can't hit up our bit, you can always find us in the comment section below on YouTube, youtube.com/2for1studios, the best place to consume the content. Then we have original content like 241 Collector, 241 Backflash. Of course, in every podcast episode up to date. We have relatively soon, we're fixing episode 150. Bruce Hutchinson is going to be back to talk Avengers Endgame to celebrate 150 episodes of Podcast 241. And we have Andor coming up next, I believe. We might do some DC Universe after that. Avatar comes out in a couple of weeks. Avatar 2, The Way of Water, which could be the biggest movie of the year. We'll see.
I would just be shocked, personally.
If it was?
It was the biggest movie. I mean, what does it have to beat? Batman? Like, what's been the biggest movie so far?
Top Gun Maverick, $1.5 billion.
God, I mean, maybe it will, but gosh, like, it just feels like the cultural interest in that is very low. Like, and I'm speaking completely anecdotally. I'm just talking about like what I encounter on the forums I'm a part of or on the internet.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels like no one cares. Like,
well, what's interesting about Avatar is that it's like the MCU for dumb people. You know? And like, I don't mean that in a bad way.
I love that.
Well, and what I say is, like, I just
well,
in saying that, and I like James Cameron made my favorite movie of all time, True Lies.
Sure.
But I just rewatched Avatar, and I said that I was very mean to say. I don't mean that at all. But I feel like the people who love that movie and watch it 1,000 times are the people who don't like.
Do those people exist? Because I've never met one.
I've met
seen one on the internet.
I've met them. Yeah, I've met
that
them.
are
And, like,
into it, like that degree.
They're super into it, and like, here's the thing: you don't get the $2.9 billion without those people.
You're right, but you have. But I guess to me, it's like. Speaking of superhero cinema again, that was Avatar came out in what, 2009? That was before what we're seeing. We get everything that Avatar gives us, which is these like crazy big visuals and these sweeping, dramatic, like epic stories and stuff.
Yeah,
we've been getting that on repeat from superhero movies ever since Avatar. I guess I feel like the space, the audience that movie found in 2009. And it kind of came out of nowhere, and like, it was kind of this like, why it became a phenomenon. I just feel like those audiences are not looking for more Avatar. They've gotten what they got, and they liked out of Avatar. They've been getting out of the MCU ever since, and have been more interesting because it's not just weird blue. Well,
and to be fair, Marvel Phase 4 is also the MCU for dumb people too. So like. But here's the big thing too. Here's the defining factor that I think it's going to make $2.9 billion. No fucking way it's going to make that money. But they just secured a release in China. A big movie hasn't released in China, American film, in like 2.5 years.
Yeah,
and
it will do
2 years. It'll make at least 400 million or 500 million in China alone.
Yeah,
and it'll make at least 500. At least 500 in America alone, which is huge. And
I can see it getting to $1 billion with China.
It will absolutely get to $1 billion. There's no question about that. The question is, will it get to one? Will it beat Top Gun, which is it's like 1.475 billion is what Top Gun is. So,
now, do you think if it doesn't, do you think we're still in the shoe in for all the other movies?
Well, they've already shot 3. It's already done. They shot 2 and 3 back to back. They ended up stopping shooting 4 and 5, and I think 6. But and Cameron said that, the success of this will determine the success. Will obviously determine shooting 4, 5, and 6. I mean, they got a theme park for Avatar. I don't think if this makes 1.5 billion, obviously the third one has to be released anyway. It will at least make $1 billion. I don't know why they wouldn't.
I think it easily will make $1 billion, especially.
So I don't know. I mean, what movie franchise that's made between 3 movies almost $5 billion or $6 billion doesn't get a 4th one and a 5th one? Even if 4 makes 800 million, and then 5 makes 700 million, you're still going to be like
it's a lot.
But I mean, it's not even just. It's about just brand recognition and IP and game. There's an Avatar game coming out. There's an Avatar theme park. There's Avatar merchandising. Yeah, they announced the game like a year ago at the Game Awards.
It just feels so late. It just feels like they may have missed the boat. Like if they'd been doing this
They
in
may have.
2010 and 11, it would make total
They may have.
sense. But
Yeah, I mean, again, I
very
don't know. I
interesting.
mean, that's just we'll see. I mean, it's
Very
I'm
interesting.
so curious about it all. But yeah, everyone, bit.ly/241mail, youtube.com/241studios. We'll catch you next time. My name is Donovan Thompson,
I'm Daniel Wingfield.
and we have spoken.